no matter how good systems are, you still get individuals involved with them.
Absolutely.
Whose desire to tell people what they want to hear outweighs what actually should happen at the next step in that process. I'm desperate to tell people what they want to hear.
Yeah.
So no matter what the next step should be, it's always if you want to hear what you want to hear, you need to phone me. Is this the show?
Is this part of your interview? Is this when they ask you? So if you were to discuss your flaws, what would you be? I'll just tell someone anything they want to hear.
Do you know, I've been thinking over and over again. I've had a lot of trouble sleeping since I applied for this. It's the second job I've applied for since I've been in the job I'm in now. I've been there 12 years. So I don't apply for jobs very often, so I don't often get this. And actually the last one was a referral by an agency, so I was quite laid back. I thought I was going to get it.
All right, okay.
So this I've gone off and applied for off my own bat. But I've been lying there at night thinking over and over again. Most of the questions I think they bring up, I'm quite confident I can answer. I've got pretty good technical knowledge. It's very similar to the job I'm doing now. So it's very similar in terms of the technical knowledge I need to have. And I've got great get-outs for if I don't have a specific technical knowledge. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, no, I just leverage my my network of colleagues that I have across the region if I wasn't sure.
Which I think is the right answer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I'm suspicious of someone who always has an answer when you secretly suspect that they don't know what they're talking about.
Oh, Nick, I come with a very strong toolkit and a very good contacts book.
Ah, okay,
yeah,
good. That's
absolutely. Good. Toolkit. I come with the toolkit.
Toolkit's a good word to keep using.
It is, I like it. I'm just going to say toolkit, until it is essentially meaningless. And then cry, come please, I just want this fucking job.
I think
I can't go back to my normal work now. I've moved on psychologically.
I think HR speak, etc., have already made the word toolkit a little bit worthless.
Yeah. No, it is. Let's keep saying it, toolkit. No, but the question I keep worrying about is the describe any of your weaknesses, or what are your weaknesses? Because it's really hard to answer without either seeming useless or smug as fuck.
Yeah.
You know, there's very little wiggle room in between those two extremes.
This is one of those things where I wonder if people who are less self-aware than us and less hard on themselves, it must be harder on them this bit because they're like, well, I genuinely don't have a clue. Whereas with me, I've got a list of things I could say.
Absolutely.
Like, well, I think I'm very good. I've been very good at the jobs I've done, but I'm not very good at all of the interpersonal bollocks that comes from working with other people because, I mean, you know what I'm talking about, panel. You know what I'm talking about. There are some people in the office where they're just holding everyone back IQ-wise, and you feel you have – and they're normally the ones in charge, am I right? So you feel like – and that's normally how I answer that question.
You see, conversely with me, if it would be something like, I just want to be left alone to get on with it and implement my own ideas. And anything you say to me that's contrary to my own personal opinions about this job is going to chafe my balls to fuck. You do know that. So you will leave me the fuck alone if I get this job.
I have oppositional defiance disorder.
Yeah, that's it. No, I will immediately see you as the man the second I start working here. You do know that, don't you? Do you know, I've even made a point, the organisation I'm working is within the NHS, and the organisation I'm going to is... really believe in it. I think it's ethically, it's a really sound.
You believe in the whole thing.
So I do, but this one in particular, I really like it, and I like its ethos. What I really like, though, is one of the criticisms I often hear of the NHS, and I think rightly, is when you look at its management structures. You've got an organisation that is roughly a Pareto split of individuals. So it's roughly 80% women, more than that, I think, to 20% men. Mm-hmm. But generally, it's vice versa. When you look at board level, it'd be the majority 8% men, 20% women, whereas at the trust board level, the executive level, the trust executives, there's 6 of them and only one of them's a man, which I sort of think is, well, that's right.
Yeah.
That's representative of this organisation. That's absolutely correct.
That's your flaw. That's what you can do. You gauge the panel, because you won't know who the panel are till you get
I know exactly who they are.
do?
I've already been told. It's 2 people.
Is it split evenly gender-wise?
It is, yep.
So you can say, if I had to describe one of my biggest issue really is I'm something of a perfectionist when it comes to gender parity in the workplace. And if I see any inequality going on, I find it very frustrating and have to do something about it.
Yeah. So I have to leave or the other dude in the room has to leave. And I offer to fight him.
Not like gender parity as in the whole panel parity that people do at comic conventions. I mean, like if you're in a position where you get to have some agency or control of the team, then you don't have to make decisions as arbitrary as the one you're talking about.
I will do. I really want it. I'll have a decent little team again if I get it.
Yeah.
Oh, I want that job so much.
So if one of the male members of staff who shifts the balance of the office comes in and sits at his computer, someone else has to get up and leave.
Oh, believe me. I mean, one of the first orders of the day is to effectively manage the male members of the team out.
Until it's just all women, as far as the eye can see.
My fantasy is to work in a team that's very much like the cover of Jimi Hendrix's Electric Ladyland.
Try not to say that in the interview, because people aren't going to appreciate the Jimi Hendrix reference. It sounds too, jazz cigarette-y.
Should I take... Yeah, funny that. Should I take a copy of the album cover in with me for reference?
This is my ideal workplace.
I'll put it in my presentation pack I've done for them.
I base it on the idealised 1960s vision of sexual equality and liberation.
Well, wasn't the 60s ideal is these bitches be gagging for me and I'm going to give these bitches what they want. Peace and love, peace and love, peace and love.
Do you want me to put this out after Tuesday?
Can you put this out after dark?
It goes out after dark anyway.
I hate sexist hippies.
To be honest with you, it is one of my... are we going to start doing that? Are we going to start shifting all of the catchphrases?
We have to port the catchphrases. The only thing you want to watch out...
Use this as an airlock.
Absolutely. We're going to have to keep them
all
here.
For the next thing.
Yeah, next thing you know, I'm going to start sort of raving and saying, Bob Carolgees or something, which would be horrific for anyone who's... horrific for anyone who's not heard the character I used to do on the Mumcast, but it'd be pretty horrific for anyone who has.
That's true. They'd think, well, I only listened to Two Grown Men. I only started listening to Two Grown Men because it was roughly the same dynamic between those two guys with their sumptuous and sexy voices, but that wankula thing, it was just too much. So I'm going to listen to Two Grown Men now.
Too much funny.
Yeah, so you can't infect this show with wankula.
No, I promise you.
Not that you have any control of it.
Well, yeah, no.
I mean, he's just a guy who turns up.
This guy is the podcasting Dom DeLuise thing again, isn't it? Dun, dun, dun.
It is really exciting, though, and it is terrifying, and going for jobs, and I don't do it, and I don't think... I haven't done it very often, and I don't think I'm built for it, because it's one of those areas where you have to be... They kind of want you to be super confident about yourself. And it's one thing knowing that you would be good at a job, but it's a whole other thing going in and selling yourself in an interview. It's quite difficult.
Especially when on one of your strengths you say you're very good at presenting yourself, whatever the audience. So you kind of, if you put that on there, you've kind of got to go in and brazen and sort of brazen it out. Which is when it's slightly less than 24 hours now. I am quaking in my boots. I'm really nervous.
It's pretty nerve-wracking.
I'm pretty well prepped, though.
Have you put podcasting anywhere on your application?
No, there wasn't. I don't think there really was an interests thing. It's a funny application.
They don't want people with interests.
I wouldn't not talk about it, but it's also something I don't know. It's one of those things that worries me because I don't mind talking about it, but would it make a potential employer itchy? Yeah, am I potentially going to say something about the organisation that would embarrass them?
Well, you've never done... I mean, I've listened to every single thing you've podcasted, and you've never done...
I'm pretty discreet.
Yeah, pretty much. Less discreet as time goes on. Yeah. I think we're settling into it a little bit now.
I don't know. I've had some really dog-awful days when I've come along in here. I could have said some things, Nick, and I chose not to.
I think as long as we don't name specific places or jobs or anything. I think you're doing well. I can appreciate how stressed out you probably are. It's been and we are going to talk about this a little bit anyway, I think, but because we can't help it, but it's been a difficult couple of weeks.
Oh, it's been a horrible couple of weeks, Nick.
The way I'm kind of feeling at the moment, because I had to, after a weekend of pretty much relaxing with my little family, Amy and Noah and the dogs, and our friends Oki and Matt, we normally each year, for the last few years, we've gone away and rented a small house somewhere down on the south coast, further down the south coast from where we are.
I wish you could see what Nick's doing. He is gesticulating towards.
That's east.
He's gesticulating in an easterly direction, which means he's going Fareham, Portsmouth way on holiday.
Not Portsmouth way.
Selsey Bill, maybe you're going to.
Pompeii. No,
Pompeii. I hear nice things about it.
Western to we've been to Lyme Regis and places like
Dorset,
that.
Jurassic
really nice.
Coast,
and it's a really nice place to go if you can get a nice house where you can take the dogs as well. It's really nice, but we aren't going to be able to afford that this year, and we're not going to be able to find the time. So my in-laws, Amy's parents, very kindly let us just use their house, which is a bit bigger than our house, and it's a bit nicer situated for stuff around Oxfordshire.
So a country break, essentially, is what you had this weekend.
I mean, they live in Wantage, so the actual house itself is in the middle of a housing estate, but it's kind of a really nice... It was big enough for all four of us and the two dogs and the baby.
Which is about the northern boundary of this organisation I'm applying for going for an interview with tomorrow.
Nice part of the country.
Mm.
And so we had a nice relaxing weekend, and it came at exactly the right time. But of course... and I've promised to give myself a bit of a break over the next couple of weeks, because anyone who's been paying any attention over the last few weeks will know that we have had big things going on, but will also know that I haven't been coping great with just all of the different stuff that's happening at the moment. And today I had to write an email to someone relating to a large amount of money in a house that wasn't what they wanted to hear. And is probably going to make it very difficult for the buyer of our house to stay attached to our house, because they've been hanging on since January. Yeah. They've been amazing, to be honest, and they would be rightfully pissed off with us at this point, just by dint of having to be pissed off at someone, even though we know that none of it could really have been helped.
I'm sure they listen, and I think that would have probably made them feel a lot better, Nick. Yeah,
maybe. I don't know. So I had to write one of those emails. It's just made me kind of feel like I would like just a couple of days to go by where some huge piece of high-stakes news didn't happen. Because I went most of my first 40 years without really having to deal with too much tragedy or any major stress. And I had enough trouble coping with that. The way I figure it, you can maybe handle like one piece of high-stakes news or tragedy news or stressful news, like world-altering news, maybe once a month. And you can handle one really big decision maybe once every 6 months to a year.
Wow, you're doing pretty well if you can go at that rate, but yeah, I guess.
Strictly speaking, you can only do, I think personally too much more heartbreak than that, and I start to... for the news side, and in terms of making decisions, the way my brain cycles over every major decision, if I can avoid doing it, like maybe stick to one every 3 months, maybe. I don't know. And
how about once a quarter?
Once a quarter is good, yeah. At the moment, it's like every day. Every day for the last 2 weeks, I've had 3 big decisions or pieces of news or something that I've had to process and deal with.
Yeah, I've been quite a large contributing factor to that, which you've borne quite a lot with me over the last couple of weeks, actually. I think our friendship's been tested.
And me, though, to be fair. I haven't been that reasonable.
I don't know.
So it's kind of but, I mean, all of that aside, trying to move house right now and all of the other stuff that's happening, it just seems like it's one thing after another at the moment. Yeah. So I mean, I guess last week was the worst, wasn't it?
Oh, it was horrible. Yeah, absolutely horrible.
For people to fix us in time a little bit, the other podcast that James and I do or have done, the reason we kind of got to know each other in the first place, that we've been doing with various friends for 250 episodes. I don't want to overstate this too much, but we had to make the decision to close that down so that we could move on to other things. But the decision to close that down, and I just keep thinking about, like, I feel kind of guilty because we seem to have upset so many people, and I'm surprised and grateful almost. Grateful's the wrong word, but I'm kind of humbled by the reaction we've had to that, especially to the last episode, which wasn't my choice, but people seem to have loved the way that went. That was entirely James's show, and people loved it. I've had lots of people telling me they loved it. You're not on Facebook, James.
No.
So you don't know. It went against my instincts, but people liked it.
We had a row about that as well.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. But at that point, we were just rowing about it. I didn't. It wasn't. It was that we were at the point last week. This makes it sound like it was entirely about us having a John and Paul sort of a moment,
Possibly.
But it wasn't really.
I'll tell you what's very comforting, though, from my point of view, as I sit here at this point, and I'm lucky, the only other piece of residual stress I have now is the interview I've got tomorrow, which will rapidly go away once I've had the interview.
Huge.
Yeah, but it'll go away quickly, whereas, the stuff you've got going on is very long-burning stuff. But it makes me feel really confident in terms of Nick is a very important friend of mine. I do 2 podcasts a week with him, so it's probably just as well we get on quite well. But if I feel like actually our friendship has gone through a test, that it's like, well, if you can still talk to each other and feel happy, comfortable and relaxed in each other's company and get through the amount of bullshit we threw at each other last week, we're pretty well set fair, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds to people who aren't in the loop, because we haven't really gone into that much detail, but it probably sounds to them like us arguing was the reason that we were having problems, but actually I think it was a result of it. We were at a point last week where everything was ratcheted up so much for both of us that any discussion or debate suddenly became really difficult.
We were both making decisions that were going to affect a reasonable amount of other people as well, which, so there's guilt and all sorts wrapped up in there as well that you have to deal with, which was made somewhat worse by some of the lovely and moving comments. And on that podcast, I don't want to dwell on it too much. It's really narcissistic, isn't it? But we do at least 2 podcasts a week, and I'm worried about being narcissistic right
I know,
now.
it's crazy.
Isn't that funny? Yeah. I'm sorry, I got distracted. I was looking in the mirror. It was the contribution by David Wynn, who... I don't know if I should let light upon magic, but pretty much was whenever I used to go on from really early on, and because Dave was one of the very first people who broke cover and said, I listened to you, I really like your show. Pretty much from that point on, and it must have been around the 20s, I think, when we first got on, it was kind of Dave that I had in mind every show that we did. I was performing to Dave, I felt. So to hear him sound so disappointed that we weren't going to be doing it anymore genuinely gave me a wobbly moment. I felt really bad. Yeah,
because in my head, I'm super pragmatic to the point of being sociopathic, and I kind of know we're going to try and do something similar together later on, that this was not a reboot, because we hate those, but kind of an opportunity to take stock of everything. So for me, I wasn't expecting other people to feel this way at all.
I mean, we've genuinely killed our darling there. I mean, I mean, it is gone. It's not. Hopefully, the 3 of us will do something very similar very soon. But Mombi's gone. Except for some very reasonable merchandise I'm putting together at the moment, and you too could be the proud owner of some more merchandise for just a small consideration.
Actually, I should mention now, because it's a good time to mention it.
Yes.
Both James and Jane have plans for a podcast. I have plans with James and hopefully with Jane and John to keep going on this, and obviously we're still going here. Nothing's happening to 2GM, although we are about to have 2 episodes that will be pre-recorded, but that's not because we're hiding anything from you, listener.
I'm going on hollybobs.
Yeah. But if you do listen to if you did listen to Momcast, everything has to be past tense, doesn't it?
Yes,
that's heartbreaking.
if you did.
If you did listen to Momcast and you want to be in the loop for the next thing, I keep saying in the loop, I think, today as well, which is a bit embarrassing. If you want to know about the next thing that's happening, I have set up a mailing list.
Or femailing list, if you'd prefer.
Or femailing list, yeah. It's tinyletter.com, and I think it's tinyletter.com/mombnext. MOMBNEXT. Check the show notes for this episode because I might have got that wrong. The mailing list for Two Grown Men has kind of been on an unexpected hiatus for the last couple of weeks because obviously partly because of stuff that's been going on and partly because with the podcasts making it quite difficult to concentrate on anything else, partly because there was actually it wasn't all emotional stuff, there was actually stuff that needed to happen as well. And partly, and I don't think we were alone, I'm kind of speaking for James here, and I don't think we were alone, the two of us, in this. When I would have been doing the mailing list for this week's Two Grown Men was around this. In fact, last week's Two Grown Men was just me doing a quick a recap of what had happened the previous week. And
sorry, to be honest with you, that was me. That was kind of fallout as well, wasn't it? Me flaking on you last week. Yeah,
it was. I mean, it was difficult. It was a difficult time, but as I was procrastinating about editing that, because I always procrastinate. Editing a podcast isn't a small job. It takes a couple of hours, but normally there's a whole bunch of procrastination happening because beforehand as well, which adds to the time because you're on your computer and you've got Twitter and Facebook and everything right there as well. Especially because I have to go online to do show notes. I tend to do those as I go. And that meant that I was in this perfect spot, this real sweet spot to fully experience in real time the online aftermath of Robin Williams dying.
Yeah.
There was even, this is the first time I've been this close to something like this. There was even that moment where I picked up someone mentioning it.
I've seen it a couple of times, but I was online roughly the same time.
But then no one was entirely sure it had happened. And I had a little discussion with a friend of mine who'd managed to find something that said it was a hoax, which was odd. And so there was this 20-minute period where you weren't entirely sure, and it was kind of aggravated by quite a lot because of it. It's Robin Williams. I think a few people of a certain disposition, not just male, but male, a certain age, with any point on a spectrum of mental health issues or whatever, and who'd grown up with Robin Williams, who were just completely useless for about 24 hours after hearing about that. It was unusual for me because I've seen other people get upset about other prominent deaths, but I've never really felt it that strongly. And Robin Williams was hit me a little bit harder than I was expecting it to. So, and also it kind of, personally for me, it hit me at a point where almost every wave of weird responses people are having to it, I'm having to restrain myself from taking really personally.
Yeah.
For example, someone was tweeting today, or maybe it was on Facebook, but they were saying that because it's one of the things in the news at the moment is that he had recently got a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. And so someone was pointing out, well, it's only taken literally 5 minutes for someone in her timeline to say, well, they knew there had to be something else for why it couldn't have just been depression that he killed himself over.
Because no one ever kills themselves because of that.
And the reason I'm trying to restrain myself from taking any of like really getting upset about any of that stuff and frustrated about any of that stuff is it's very difficult for people to understand. Even a lot of people who have like some level of depression or some condition but don't necessarily realise it. They just think they're glum sometimes or something. It's very difficult for people to empathise with anyway. I find it difficult to empathise with a lot of people because I tend to just get it situationally anyway when things are really getting on top of me. But at the same time, a suicide uniquely does that to people. People try and work, even if you don't know the person, you're trying to work out why they could have done it. Because I get it, because it's a kind of an existential fear, because the fear is if you can't work out why someone did it, then it could literally happen to anyone. It could happen to you. I think that's where, not you specifically, James. We all know how you're going to die. The fear kind of hits people, especially if they're people who are completely oblivious to how sad clownish characters are. If they only ever saw him and he looked upbeat and happy on TV and that's all they ever interpreted, it's understandable that they would be looking for something deeper than the story that is being presented to them as to why it would have happened. And I've known a few of the people I know who've talked about trying to get stuff done this week have had that same situation. They sat down to try and write something, either about Robin Williams or not about Robin Williams, and were just like, no, I need a bit longer.
Which I'm quite glad to hear you say, because I've had, there's no way to say it without sounding cliched, struggles with depression, but it's taken me a very long time to come to terms with the fact. I always wrote off my depression as I had depression when my dad died, and now I just get blue. Like, no, actually, for the last 15 years, on and off, I get depression to a lesser or greater extent, and the most recent bout I went through was particularly bad. I went to some really nasty lows, and last week was problematic for me. Aside from the podcast stuff, was problematic for me for two reasons. One was how concerned in the immediate aftermath, and my wife was hearing about what had happened and sort of thinking about her own situation as being someone who lives with someone who has depression. It gave her fears and concerns for the future, obviously. But what I found really difficult to put up with was, and I understand some people need the catharsis of talking, and I think it's really good to talk about depression. What I don't think is really good is to talk about the depression in a knee-jerk reaction to someone very famous who suffers from that condition dying, and communicating your thoughts about depression in a way that kind of presents the condition as a consistent experience for anyone. It's a really individual, personal thing, depression. It affects everyone differently, and I was getting kind of pissed off and fed up with everyone offering their 2 fucking cents on Twitter as to why either their depression was the most no, I'm going to be unfair to people because they have to deal with it, but people trying to offer experience as definitive, and people trying to offer opinion as definitive in the fallout of someone who was really important and really iconic for our generation. I've never really experienced it before, but last week I actually, and I hesitate to use the phrase, but genuinely found a lot of that triggering. And actually was compounding how I was feeling and making things worse. And I almost get a feeling like my experience is kind of consistent with what you spoke about there, with you talking to friends who couldn't get their words down on paper. I don't think I could have last week. And I think it was just all a bit too much, to be fair. Emotionally, you need to sometimes get a bit of distance to try and work out how you feel about this stuff. I don't know, but I think sometimes that's when Twitter actually can be quite a painful place to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is when people feel like they have to get this stuff off their chests, and I think it's good to talk about depression. It's never good, I don't think, to talk about it in a reactive way.
I mean, I found, I generally find Twitter quite difficult in any sort of trending situation where everyone's talking about one
Well,
thing.
it can be a force for good. I think this week, the coverage of the what's going on in Ferguson, Twitter, and kind of that's what Twitter's at its very best. And it's weird. Within 7 days, I think I've seen Twitter in particular at its best and its worst.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. Ferguson's a weird situation because you shouldn't need Twitter to hear about something happening in a town in America.
And I don't think you do. It's just Twitter gives it a prominence that that I'm not sure that the editorially the BBC can do.
Oh no,
for example.
Well, no, I mean, I read an article earlier in the week about how just the way the algorithms on Facebook work, in a way that rewards newness of something, spikes in behaviour, meant that you were hearing lots about Ferguson on Twitter, but you weren't hearing very much about it on Facebook. But it wasn't really it was hardly in the news at all. So, and I don't think that was unique to us. I got the impression it wasn't in that much American news because they were arresting journalists and stuff. Well, so it's kind of they were trying to enforce a sort of a media blackout. It seemed like, which is crazy in an American town. It
is kind of terrifying.
But I know what you mean.
It's not even kind of terrifying. It's actually terrifying.
And I know what you mean. And to be honest, I was kind of surprised by how, I guess people who know me wouldn't have been, because it was late at night when I was reading about Robin Williams, and it was going to be several hours before I got to talk to anyone, before I got to talk to Amy. I was blurting out quite a lot, but at the same time, I was talking very much about what I thought of Robin Williams, but I was seeing within minutes of the news breaking, people were starting to tweet stuff that I know they tweeted when Philip Seymour Hoffman died. Like, it's as if people. I felt like a lot of people seem to have a bunch of phone numbers or websites, support websites and go to links and stuff like that. None of which is a bad thing, because apparently when someone really prominent, or when there is a really prominently reported suicide, the amount of suicides spikes. I've heard that a lot in the last week, so maybe that's useful, but at the same time, maybe talking about it and saying very definitive things, as you said, linking that experience to your experience.
And I didn't have any problem with people sort of suggesting that there are places to seek help if you want it. It was people sort of, like I say, talking very definitively about, how depressed people feel. I was like, well, fuck you, because I don't feel like that.
Yeah, no two people feel. The thing, when it comes to brain chemistry, when it comes to anything to do with the brain, it's too complicated to say that about someone else, I think. I think you can see certain behaviours and trends, and like with evolutionary psychology, you can see in certain... Like you can look at a group of teenagers and work out which is the alpha and which is all of that stuff. But how that comes out is never the same twice. Not really. It just trends in a certain direction.
I think for me, part of my irritation as well comes from it took me a very, very long time to accept that I may have an issue. And I don't think, unusually with men in the UK, I'm not sure about elsewhere, but I know that this is a fact with a lot of British men. The reason that depression goes undiagnosed is because you feel like you're making a fuss. And, I still have my dad's message. I can hear my dad's voice in my head saying, stop feeling sorry for yourself and pull yourself together. Stop being so self-indulgent. So I think for me to accept depression, I was looking for a very set group of symptoms with which I could satisfy myself that I had a problem. And it was only going to a very nice, very considerate doctor who took me very seriously. I mean, to be honest with you, she's got, an 18-stone man crying in her office. I suppose it's quite hard not to take that seriously. But she took me very seriously, and actually it was her acceptance that's helped me start on a road where I'm starting to take a bit more ownership, I think, for my mental health, or understanding my mental health, whereas before that, I just thought I was a sort of glum. Some days I was jolly, and at other times I was very glum. I was starting to identify a cycle, but, I just thought, no, that's me, isn't it? It's my biorhythms. I used to have a thing on my Acorn Electron where you'd work out biorhythms.
I like biorhythms.
Very popular in the 80s, biorhythms. I thought it was just me biorhythms.
Well, I find biorhythms really satisfying because they kind of fit how I understand nature's cycle.
Yeah.
If you get if you get 100 foxes and 100 rabbits, then pretty soon all the rabbits are going to die out, and then the foxes are going to die out because there are fewer rabbits. But then when there are fewer foxes, there'll be more rabbits, and that's kind of how I understand biorhythms.
That's how the dinosaurs ultimately went, isn't it? Because it was the food chain got fucked.
Yes.
After the
they were fucking their food chain.
Yeah.
And that's not a great, because what you do is you're fucking the animals you want to eat. If you're a dinosaur, you're fucking the animals you want to eat. But then if you do it too much, you start to form an affection. There's a bond there, and then you find it more difficult to eat. But if you're a Tyrannosaurus Rex and you suddenly feel an affection for all of the prey around you, well, you're a carnivore. You're not suddenly going to become a herbivore. So of course you're going to die out. That and nosebleeds. You know about my theory of nosebleeds.
Yes. No.
Tyrannosaurus Rex. I don't know about all the other dinosaurs. Tyrannosaurus Rex definitely died out because of nosebleeds.
Scratching their noses?
No, they couldn't scratch shit with those tiny little arms.
So it's using other things to scratch their noses with, is it?
No, they've got giant nose.
Yeah.
They've got big old legs.
Yeah.
Tiny little arms.
Stupid little arms.
They run around a lot.
How did they wipe their bottoms?
Well, I mean, I don't think it was anything to do with bottoms, but maybe there was some sort of infection thing happening there. I don't know. But basically, if you've got tiny little arms, but you're running around all the time, you're going to trip over a lot.
Yeah.
No way to stop yourself. Nosebleeds.
Good call. Talking of bottoms, Scarlett.
Have we finished on Robin Williams then?
Just an aside.
Okay.
Literally just an aside about my daughter. It's the right show for it.
No, it is. It's a good show for it.
She's doing quite well. We were talking about rewards on the show a couple of weeks ago. Stickers are doing really well, and we've actually found she wants an Equestria Girls My Little Pony, and she should be able to, at the end of this week, she'll fill up a chart and she'll have enough money to get one from Tesco's Extra. They're doing them for a price that she'll be able to afford this weekend. Very exciting. Sorry, that was me breathing. So I left an edit point there for you, though. Did you see? So if you wanted to take that out, you were perfectly capable of doing so, though. Bit more for you, though. I lost my train of thought now.
Equestria Girls, very exciting. Reward stickers.
So I've
got something to say about this, actually.
She started to wipe her own bottom. Brilliant, because she gets a reward for it. But I've gone from having to wipe her bum to inspecting it to make sure she's got enough, because she demands it. She demands I inspect her ass.
Very diligent.
It is. Also, she sits there really grumpy going, I don't want to wipe my own bottom. I'm like, well, everyone has to wipe their own bottom.
Eventually, that's one of the three certainties of life.
And I stand there and I start trying to reason with her. And then I'm like, remember, she's 4. And you can't reason with a 4-year-old. They don't do reason. Well, they do, but not like that.
I'm so careful when it comes to wiping Noah's bottom that I'm slightly worried I'm going to give him a complex about it. So I have to kind of rein that in a little bit.
But so going back to Robin Williams, I've watched more films than I normally do with these sort of things. Normally, someone significant dies he liked, and you go back and watch a favourite film. And I did that on, my goodness, Wednesday night maybe.
Sounds about right.
Yeah,
talking about it.
And my wife and I watched The Birdcage, which is, in terms of a Robin Williams film that we both love. We both love The Birdcage. I think it's such a great performance.
It gets overlooked a lot, you know.
I think it's a wonderful film.
Because it isn't one of his super serious ones, but it's also not one of his obviously kid-centric ones either.
No, but he plays it really well, I think, you know, whether or not it plays into my stereotypes of what gay men are like, though, I don't know.
I think, I don't know, I think that if the only character in that, if the tone of the whole film was set by, I can't remember the other chap's name.
Yeah, no, it's bugging me now.
If the tone of the film was set by his husband in it, or boyfriend, his partner, then I think it would be quite an uncomfortable watch. It already is a little bit of an uncomfortable watch because he is so flamboyant. But Robin Williams' character is quite masculine, is quite unusual for a. I think it probably is a gay stereotype, but it certainly at that time was quite unusual because as a counterpoint, he's a very masculine character. He's not very flamboyant, and he restrains himself quite a lot in it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think
so. No, it's a really restrained, quite studied performance, I think. Then watched Bicentennial Man, which has got quite short shrift from people as being overly sentimental, and it's syrupy deep in whimsy. But, it moves quite quickly. The character of the robot that Robin Williams plays is really sympathetic, really believable. And there's quite a fast-moving cast of characters, most of whom you sort of really buy into in terms of, I really liked it. It really worked for me. I was quite surprised it was got as panned as it did.
I think it suffered from being an adaptation of a really well-loved classic book. Yeah, I haven't read the book or seen the film except for parts of it, and it didn't look bad.
I read a fair bit of Asimov when I was younger, but not that. But no, I really liked it. And Asimov's books generally a little more sterile, and that's not fair. They're exciting and interesting, but they are a little colder than.
They're very ideas heavy.
Yeah, and then toys. I could not make it through toys. I could not abide it.
It's such a weird film, though.
I just couldn't do it.
It's a really weird film because
never felt like it gets going. Yeah,
it looks, for all intents and purposes, like it's going to be a typical kids film, and it never quite does that. It's really odd.
It's got a weird Burton-esque vibe going on, but about
not quite,
as well,
not quite as slick as Burton at that point.
Absolutely. So. It was really difficult. I think I gave it about 3/4 an hour and just I can't do this anymore. But what I think the point I was getting to is I watched his film, just forgotten what a wonderfully versatile performer he was, because you must be the same as me. You remember him from Mork and Mindy originally, and then you saw a bit of his stand-up, I imagine, and he was fucking nuts.
I lived with a bit of his...
and Popeye as well, I imagine.
Well, I obviously saw Mork and Mindy because we're the right age for that. Interestingly, it's a show that everyone remembers, but you never really see it in repeat. It's not like Happy Days. Now. But then the next thing I had was that Live at the Met stand-up, which I must have... I don't think it was just that it was Robin Williams. I don't think we had much stand-up, unless you had the... I guess it was around the same time as Eddie Murphy's stand-up.
Well, I'm going to say there were three, weren't there? That Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy and Robin Williams all made these, big, brash, bold stand-up shows that I think most of us... They were almost like playground contraband, weren't they,
Yeah. And I must have watched that so much, and it was probably the first time I'd heard anyone talking about addiction.
Yeah.
Really. Because he talks about it loads in that. And he talks about, he talks about becoming a father for the first time, which is kind of apt to us, but you don't get a sense that... You get a sense that gave him a sense of meaning, that previously he'd been doing whatever the fuck he wanted to his body, and suddenly he was having to be responsible for someone else. Which never struck me as particularly happy. And so I never really got... I loved watching it, and I think it probably started the stand-up I like tends to be the more aggressively cynical stuff, because it's quite cynical.
Really. Oh, yeah.
Compared to him on any chat shows, just turning up and not really letting the interviewer get a word in.
Oh, yeah.
Which always annoyed me, because that's not what I watch chat shows for.
And ironically... Yeah, you grew up to it,
No, well, yeah, I know, yeah. But that's not really what chat shows are for, and it's easy to kind of see. You can read so much into the fact that he would never answer any questions directly about himself, and he's not the only person who's like that. I think you get Jim Carrey's probably a bit like that, and there are a few others who they're not. He's not just the template for that. There are lots of comedians who wouldn't let you in. Andy Kaufman.
Oh my God. Yeah.
None of them quite as annoying as Robin Williams was when he was on the couch, but it was like...
Oh, no, Andy Kaufman was much more annoying.
Yeah, he was much more
Robin
annoying.
Williams.
But the most of the first films I saw him in, because he was a little bit like Will Smith. That's a weird thing to say. In that he did all of the big films. Those are what he got famous for. But when he first started going from TV to films, he was doing dramatic. I remember watching The World According to Garp. Yeah. Some really late night. You know, it's not a film loads of people know, but I think it was his first movie performance.
No, Popeye, I think.
Was it? Though?
I'm pretty sure Popeye came first.
I don't know. It might have done, but
wasn't Garp 82? Popeye was 80. I think Garp was 82.
Maybe, I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe you're right. You're better at that sort of thing than me. But Garp was played straight. It's a funny film.
Yeah.
But it's funny in that way that a really dark, cynical writer can look at the world. And John Lithgow's the funniest thing in that film.
But he was an actor. I mean, he was a straight actor. Yeah. He always was. That's how he trained. He had this energy that needed to come out as a stand-up. You know, he didn't take a stand-up route like maybe a Louis C.K. who's sort of found a more sort of a TV show, and you imagine. I guess he's in films and stuff now. I like his stand-up,
so, but he's a jobbing comedian. Him and Mark Maron and people.
Whereas Williams was an actor and a very gifted one at that. It was that nervous energy or cocktail of drugs, one or the other that he took. Well, he was with Belushi the night Belushi died, so presumably sort of they were on a similar plane of consciousness together.
Trajectory, maybe. I think it's mostly dramatic roles that I really remember him for. And actually, in recent years, I'd almost forgotten about him. And I've heard people talk about that being him. I saw somebody referring to him probably struggling to cope with his decline.
Which, if you look at his career, he probably was. He'd just gone back to TV, hadn't he?
Well,
and the show he was on got shit canned, I think.
The show he was on got shit canned, yeah. But I think that it's possibly seeing cause and effect the wrong way round, or maybe not even seeing cause and effect. Maybe they're not even being cause and effect.
Yeah,
maybe.
I wouldn't even. I know from my point of view, I don't even want to speculate. It's like,
he wasn't making as many films.
Yeah,
and so when one of them didn't land, that seemed like a bigger deal. But it's like,
well, actually, podcasting has taught me not to judge people for not making films anymore, and not judge what their motivations are, or what Hollywood's motivations are. After a very early Momcast, where I laid into Rick Moranis.
Oh yeah,
only to find that his film career had ebbed because his wife, I think, passed away, and he'd basically given up working in film to look after his family. So you don't know, and I think you made the point earlier, don't you? You see someone on the screen, you make an assumption about who they are and what they are. You don't know what their motivations are. How can you? So it's foolish to speculate, and you don't know what the motivations of their prospective or potential employers are either.
No. Are we talking about Robin Williams, or are we talking about your interview tomorrow?
I don't know.
In the last year, the things that had brought me back to thinking about Robin Williams a lot were he was in an episode of Louis C.K. of Louis, which was just amazing, and you've seen pictures of that quite a lot. There's an animated GIF, because there's a scene where Louis C.K. and Robin Williams are standing and they kind of break and start laughing, both of them. And you hear a little bit more about the episode because the whole episode is about them not knowing each other, but both turning up at they're the only two people at the funeral of a stand-up that they both knew, that nobody else turned up to. And at the end of it, they promise, I don't want to spoil it, you might want to watch it, listener. Louis, it's a really good episode of Louis. So there was that, and there was an episode of Harmontown, the podcast, where they had been mercilessly taking the piss. I don't know if he knew this, but they'd been mercilessly taking the piss out of him over the previous few weeks and it hadn't ever occurred to me at the time, but actually by today's perspective, when you watch his old stand-up, a lot of his impersonations, a lot of his voices and stuff, they're anachronistically racist. Or do you know what I mean? Or they seem anachronistically racist, or like Apu from The Simpsons. It depends on how you want to look at it.
In so much as when you listen to Eddie Murphy stand up, it's so sexist it makes your toes curl to the point where you think they're going to pop off.
And it's not that it wasn't racist. It's just that our standards have most of our standards have shifted to the point where we didn't register it when we were listening to it before. And so they'd been taking the piss out of him on that. But then the following week, because he was a huge comic fan, as well as being a huge video game fan, he happened to turn up with Bobcat Goldthwait, because Goldthwait was turning up. So he was on there, and if he knew that he was so classy and wasn't trying to take over or anything, and it was good. But also there's a Mark Maron interview with him that is just amazing from within the last year, I think. And the main part of that is about, I hadn't realised he was accused of, people have accused him down the line of stealing jokes.
Oh, I did not know that.
And he was very, and it's a thing that comes up on Mark Maron every few comedians, every 10 or so comedians, there'll be someone who, because there are a few people who are accused of this. Robin Williams has always apparently had a reputation of, if someone calls him on it and he looks at it and realises, oh yeah, I did use this joke when I was doing a bit of stand-up, he will pay them, which a lot of comedians will dig in, and say, oh, no, that didn't happen, sort of thing. Whereas Robin Williams, and I buy this, to be honest, so much of what he was doing was just stream of consciousness, literally just trying to get the voices out, that him recycling stuff that he picked up from other places is kind of, I can see it happening. But at the time, he was also talking a lot about how he'd recently relapsed. Drugs wise, he was on a film shoot somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and feeling quite isolated. And I think he relapsed quite badly, and he was just coming back from it at that point.
Sure.
So it was quite. So that's been in my mind, those three things, and also the film we watched last night. Not last night. We watched on Saturday night or Friday night. Doesn't matter. We introduced our friends Oki and Matt to the film The World's Greatest Dad.
Okay.
Which is directed and written by Bobcat Goldthwait again. And is Robin Williams is in it as a teacher who's also a writer, who's kind of quiet and kind of at the bottom of every pile. And his son is an absolute arsehole, like a complete arsehole, and is just totally horrible to him. He's constantly Robin Williams' character is constantly getting called in front of his boss, the principal, because his son's such a nightmare. And a tragedy happens, and then you get to see how he responds to tragedy, and then you get to see how everybody else in the town and in the school responds to tragedy. And it's amazing. It's incredibly real. It's incredibly honest. I loved it instantly, and I was surprised that Amy did, because it's quite bleak.
Okay.
But also kind of weirdly hopeful and accepting of how weird people are.
Yeah.
But she loved it as well, and our friends loved it when we rewatched it with them. But there's a reason why you're not hearing any quotes from it or seeing any macros from it on Tumblr or anywhere in the wake of him dying, despite seeing clips from Hook and from Aladdin and from everything else that say, oh, he's in a better place with Aladdin now and stuff like that.
Delusional bollocks, you mean? Because
you would look like an arsehole if you used any of the prominent quotes from this. The film is about suicide.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of about suicide, and none of the sound bites would seem appropriate, except they're completely appropriate.
Yeah.
If he was a darker comedian, I choose to think, and this is entirely me mapping onto him, I choose to think that Robin Williams is a nicer person than me, and that's why maybe things weighed on him probably more heavily than they do on me. I don't know. That's assumptions, but I choose to think that little smile he had was meant that he didn't quite have my cold, dark heart. You get that impression from seeing him even in his most manic moments, that he wanted things to be nicer than they were. He gets accused often, including Bicentennial Man and stuff like that, of picking projects that present a more hopeful version of the world than necessarily I believe in. So I'm not sure what my point was. Did you get where I was going?
I did. I did get where you're going. It's interesting you say assuming that he was a better person than you, because obviously I assume that everyone's a better person than me. Recently on the BBC News website they had this, or was it going around Twitter? But I think it was like a top 10 dictators list. And they had numbers of hundreds of thousands murdered. I was thinking about maybe getting that laminated and titling it "People Who Are Definitely Worse Than You Are." And when I'm feeling really low, I'm going to just get it out and go, "Oh yeah, Pol Pot, yeah, good."
It's nice to know.
Idi Amin, yeah, good. No problem.
It doesn't matter how bad things get. You probably won't hit the top 7 of that. Definitely not the top 5.
Roman Catholic Church, right? Good.
We are running out of time, and I just wanted to mention something else that happened this week. A couple of things. You mentioned, Scarlett, Noah, given the extra amount of space and the carpet at my in-laws' house, he's been crawling properly. Cool. I don't know if you've seen him. He tends to do a commando crawl.
No, but my wife and daughter did last week.
He does the commando crawl. And on that floor he was doing lots of normal crawling. Yeah. That was good. And he's starting to... He definitely knows what the word mama means now. He isn't just repeating it. Because when you ask him, where's mama or where's Auntie Oki or any of those things, he'll look for them. Also, I spent a lot of time watching children's TV over the weekend. Okay. Those adverts are awful.
You ain't seen nothing yet. What side are you watching? Nick Jr.? You're watching a lot of Peppa Pig?
We were flicking back between CITV, I think, and Channel 5.
Oh, so Milkshake. You watch Milkshake.
Oh, my God. It's the worst of humanity. Well, not the worst. I mean, Pol Pot and all of that.
We need to
flip out your little list.
We need to talk about this in more detail. My daughter enjoys watching YouTube on the iPad. It's not unsupervised, but we let her have reasonable free rein within certain parameters. She is obsessed with unboxing videos.
Yeah,
and I can't believe how many there are of just people demoing stuff, taking it out of a Kinder Egg, really quite slickly produced, or unboxing things. She's obsessed with it, but weirdly, it hasn't made her demand things. She's aware they exist, but she isn't demanding of them, which is strange. She just seems fascinated with it. And I start to worry, and then I think, well, no, as a kid, I was always fascinated with seeing stuff about toys. As a kid, toys are really interesting. They're one of your main topics of interest. And actually, watching these videos, she's kind of getting the visceral buzz from watching them opened without me having to shell out any money. So maybe, just maybe, they're a force for good. I do worry about the welfare of some of the children that are in the videos, in terms their parents seem to be a little bit obsessed with the fact they're making videos and have some minor internet celebrity, by the by. But it doesn't seem at present all that damaging, but I still feel really uncomfortable with it.
Unboxing videos are a weird thing, but I kind of get it. The adverts... it's really difficult for me because I try not to let gender stuff, even though we talk about it all the time, I try not to let it bother me that much or to see it everywhere. And at the same time, I really like capitalism. I really like consumerism. But then you watch 5 adverts in a row and it's all boys playing with cheap plastic tatty, all of it licensed to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or something crap, and then you see the girl adverts and it's all like, it's not even girl adverts for wholesome. Am I using the word wholesome? It's kits so that you can make these little high heel shoes that you will never be able to wear because they're tiny, that you can decorate them.
Oh no, it's horrible.
It's it's
gendered toys. I mean, it's a nightmare. And it's
I think Playmobil's the only one that used both genders.
Yeah, kind of, probably. And it's why these unboxing videos, actually, I'm not that massively uncomfortable. Because they just show the products in a real-world setting. It's a human being or two human beings opening a box and reacting to what's inside. There's no frills, there's no bullshit. It is what it is. Some of it are clearly sponsored and supported by industry, but it's kind of... It's no frills advertising. It's like, well, I've opened a Kinder Egg and there's a toy inside. Well, great.
Yeah, I mean, that actually probably disposes of some of the mystery. That might be why she's not demanding it, because actually they're pretty boring.
She likes Kinder Egg, but she's not a pestering kid at the moment, you know?
She's aware that, like, the surprises, you can go and watch all of the surprises on video and suffer it vicariously. Yeah. Suffer it.
She's pretty chilled out like that, but, you know.
That is a huge... We've basically touched on loads of stuff that are huge conversations.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. It means we haven't run out of things to say on Two Grown Men yet, so we won't have to kill this one yet.
Yeah, another 4 years yet.
As James said, or I said, as we said about James, the next two shows are going to be pre-recorded, but hopefully they'll still be good. Yeah. He'll be in Devon. We're not going to try and pretend that he's here and we're doing it in time. We might do. We might have forgotten we said this by the time we record it.
Who knows? There's a lot of drinking between now and then.
Yeah, that's true. The site is at twogrownmen.net. There are full show notes on there. I will try to get back on to the mailing list. We've had a couple of weeks of being a bit rubbish with that. I'm thinking seriously of dropping the show notes aspect from it, though, because it seems... I can't imagine anyone actually... I think what you really want is... all me just brain splurging whatever's going on with my mental health that week, and then maybe a recipe at the end.
Maybe. So, I should get back on that.
Didn't even talk about me trying to return the homeopathy stuff to Boots.
We'll definitely save that for the next one.
We need to talk about that.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you, listener. You're awesome.
Yeah, cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.